So the issue around the cuts in legal aid funding is enormous. I mean, so that's impacted every form of criminal justice within this country enormously, because it's cut justice down to those that can afford it rather than those that need justice. And usually it's those that need justice the most are the ones that now cannot afford justice. Whereas those that can afford justice are getting it. It's become an upper middle class access to criminal justice system, unless it's actually a criminal offence. Civil offences is where it's hurt the worst. Where anyone trying to take a civil action has virtually got to remortgage the house, should they be lucky enough to have a house to remortgage. Sorry,
thank you very much. Anyone else wants to?
You covered it all.
Any other questions? Susan? Yes?
Did you have a question?
Yeah, if you want to go.
No, please, you go first.
I was just wondering if any panelists, that you can say how hate crime, especially misogynistic hate crime, can disproportionately affect people of racialized minorities and just immigrants in general, who also have a much harder time going to the police hours than any other group.
Yeah, I'll take that one.
Let's repeat the question. I didn't quite understand it.
You wanted to know, you wanted to focus on individuals of racial minorities, how it impacts on people who are basically non-white.
That's another level to
reporting hate crime. Yes, it has a massive impact. Being black, female, gay, three things, you're already at the bottom. You're already at the bottom because you're black. You're already at the bottom because you're gay. You're already at the bottom because you're female. If you're disabled, there again, another layer down. And any other issue you can think of, trans, you just get further and further down, further away from having the power. You'd think if you have so many different options, you could go, oh, hey, mate, I've got this, that, and the other. I want to report crime because. No. It's you feel very distant. You feel that there's too many barriers in having that conversation with a police officer. Bearing in mind that most of the police that you see are white and male. There's very little out there that reflects me. I'm not saying there are no black lesbian police officers. I haven't met one. I think I'm going to join just to...
Please do, I think we need you.
Seriously. I'll be the only black female lesbian in the village, police village.
Can I add to the response to that as well? I think that when we talk about groups that intersectionalities, we have the crossover between the LGBT communities and different communities that may be adversely affected by policing and or the community. We're taking away multiple support networks that they may have. So you may have even less support networks or less encouragement to come to the police or less people that have had a positive experience to advise and guide you. There is a lot of work being done around intersectionality at the moment. It's being recognised finally that whether it be your religion, whether it be your ethnicity, whether it be your gender history, there is a lot of work now being done to recognise that a person isn't just one of those things. A person is multiples. And again, I understand if you can't see someone that represents you, then how can you feel that you can come in? So again, join the police, please. We need you, and we need more people, and we need communities to approach us as a whole, and hopefully we can improve it.
I want to ask something to that because...
Can I?
Yeah, please.
Just say, one of the issues that there also is that when the hate crime is intersectional, other than due to your religion, due to your sexuality, due to your race, it still counts as one hate crime if am I allowed to swear on this?
Go for it.
If someone calls you a fucking Jew bitch, okay, which hate crime does that count? Because you only counted one. And if we're counting misogyny, there's 3 there. So which one does it come under? Because you can only count one. So what the police will do is try and find out which one you feel affected you the most. What you have to then decide is which part of your identity are you going to deny that was insulted, was abused, to count it the once. So which ones of those 2 do you then deny to get that one? Because it will only count once. That is a really hard decision to make for someone. I'm Jewish, I'm lesbian, I'm queer, and I'm intersex. So I can get all sorts of different insults in within one, and female, of course, get all those sorts of different insults in one go. So, and I have to pick one. Which one do I pick? That is the difficulty. There needs to be a way of having that one crime that is then put down as one crime, but underneath that, having the other parts of your personality recognised and counted. And that is a really difficult thing to do at the moment. But how difficult is a piece of software that you're paying some 16-year-old to write? Because it will be a 16-year-old that writes it and can do it really well.
Yeah.
Because that is the difficulty with intersectionality, is count. What do you count?
Yeah.
If I could just add to this as well, the questioner asked as well in relation to immigrants. So new people coming into the country, especially if there's a lack of English, it's actually knowing what the law is as well. And I think a lot of people, a lot of immigrants coming into the country don't have knowledge of how strong the legal protections are for somebody who might be gay, trans, or whatever, because the country that they've come from, those laws don't exist. And quite often, if that person's an asylum seeker, the legal system is completely different to what's here in the UK. So I think that can have a huge impact on when it comes to reporting a hate crime, be it race, faith, or LGBT. So yeah, that's what I'd like to say on that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I was just wondering, because we were talking a lot about reporting the hate crime, but it's always, if the victim has to report it, is there actually a responsibility of a bar owner or of a McDonald's, if I get hate crime there at 2 o'clock in the morning, that they have to report it to the police, or that it's not only on the victim side?
The legislation is, when you look at what a hate crime or a hate crime incident is, it's what the victim perceives it to be, but also any member of the public. So is there a responsibility for somebody to report a hate crime if they witness something? Yes, I would say so. But like what Elaine was saying earlier on if you're on a train and on your own and somebody's potentially been very threatening and violent, yes, you can call the police, but then it's going through that process afterwards. And quite often people, rather than wanting to report, will withdraw and not take that risk. But there again, there are a lot of people in society who will do that.
I don't think there's any legal obligation on an organisation to report. So the members of staff that works there is now work with the LGBT network to go into larger businesses to offer support and training to the members of staff and the managers there. The LGBTQ community spend a lot of money in London. We're a very valid part of the economy and of London. So it's within a business's interest, in my opinion, to actually protect their customers. But there is no legal obligation for them to do that. And again, there may be moral issues why they can't. There may be reasons in themselves that they can't. So wouldn't judge someone that doesn't. But if we can try and get in and encourage the businesses to do that, and they can do it online, they can do it anonymously. They do not have to necessarily jump in front of that angry person on the train. I think the BTP now have a text number where you can report crime, which can be done anonymously. There are quite a few police officers generally on trains. I've been involved in numerous incidents off duty. A police officer is always a police officer, whether they're wearing a uniform or not. If I go home tonight and I see something, I'm duty bound to take, whether or not if it's a very large person, I might not be running in there, but to stay and to ensure that it's reported and to ensure that the evidence is there. I think more training, more benefits need to be seen. I think larger companies now are doing it, especially in America. You're seeing a lot of larger companies coming out to diverge slightly. We had obviously the North Carolina bathroom bill. A lot of large companies refused to go there. They said we're not doing business there anymore. So I think there is a change happening within large corporations because they understand the value that the LGBT community brings to the area that they want to make money from.
Great, thank you. Did you want to say something?
No, you've got another person with the mask over there with the hand up.
Just stemming from that conversation about the role of businesses, I work with investors who work with corporate boards, which are notoriously stale, pale, and male. And we deal with diversity. We try to work with them on diversity broadly, but that tends to translate into male, female. And some of the investors we work with do raise LGBTQ issues, but we don't sort of know how to engage the companies and the boards on these issues. So what would your recommendation be with how to sort of engage company boards on this?
Well, the way...
Excuse me. How to engage company boards with that issue?
Yeah, the way to do that is to engage various charities, to create links between the LGBT charities, understand what they stand for, what they do in the LGBT community, fund them or second some of your staff to them. Be part of the corporate responsibility. You've got to make those connections and see that it actually adds value to that corporate company, that investor. It's important that it's not just a sticker on the side of the bus going down the middle of Pride. They've got to be more proactive. They've got to think about when they're investing in other countries that have hanging, flogging as a cure for your sexuality. I mean, if you hang a person, they're dead. It's not even, you've not really done anything about their sexuality. It's getting them on board in that way. You have to kind of you've got to do it as a money thing, because that's all they understand at the initial point, and then you've got to think about it in terms of well, we are all human. We deserve the same opportunities and respect than anybody that's not outside our various sectors, and that's how you buy them in. But first of all, it's like, there's Forum Plus, bung some money there. ELOP, bung some money there. Elaine McKenzie, bung some money there.
Sorry, I think I've turned on. Oh, right, turned on again. One thing I've seen that actually happen. Oddly enough, I know Waitrose. It's the gay place to shop, especially if you're a gay man and you've got money. Change from Tesco's, but what they do is when a member of staff's got up to a certain level of length of service, they can apply to do 6 months in a charity, paid at their salary. because I worked in refuge and we had a member of Waitrose staff at a mid-level management level come in and work within a refuge for 6 months for nothing. So the refuge got a valuable worker, had to train them around refuge issues, but was an experienced and intelligent person, came in and worked for 6 months in a refuge for nothing. And their experience from what they were doing was really valuable to that refuge. So there is organisations that can do that. It's a matter of that person choosing where they want to volunteer for that 6 months. And it's getting them to know that there is LGBT charities that could really use someone like that free for 6 months with that relative experience. And if more companies can do that, because that person went back re-energised to work within their company and to work and make change within that company from what they've learned in refuge. So imagine what can happen if someone spends 6 months with an LGBT organisation and goes back. So it's good for the company, and it's good for the charity, and it's good for society.
Yeah.
So like, we're talking about big corporations, so we're talking about the Netflix. Yeah, with the trans people walking out on the 20th of October because of Dave Chappelle. What as a society should we do about that? Because if I cancel my Netflix, I'm just a one person, that's like £12 a month. What do we do as a society? Instead of cancelling Dave Chappelle, do we bring him into like a forum and say, look, we talk to him, other than me and my gang going, we're going to cancel him, cancel Netflix, and then he's still going to be rich.
Yeah, so that's in general, I think the question, what can an individual do with a big company like Netflix or even Amazon or all these things? How much power do we have, and what other approaches are there than just cancelling the membership?
Can I just ask what happened with Netflix? I'm completely...
The trans woman got reinstated, but they're still going to do the walkout on the 20th of October. But they're still going to go ahead with Dave Chappelle's show on Netflix. So
what was the original incident?
So he was talking about trans, saying that he doesn't understand why there's trans people. And he said, yeah, it's pretty... I don't want to go into too much because I've watched it, but...
It's very insulting towards trans people
Yes.
in particular, and
Especially
transphobic.
black trans.
I'd say Twitter in that regard can be your friend, and the way the internet can ignite like a bushfire just going off, and we see this every day, and quite often a big corporation will turn
This one did
its
not
view
work
around.
out because Netflix was standing by him, said they didn't care, like that he said what he said, and they're still standing by him.
And that would be in America as well.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it? So, and of course, so when you look at the debate that's going on about gender identity and where the transphobia is, what a lot of that opposition is being justified by freedom of speech issues. So certainly in America, that is it the First Amendment, where you can say whatever you like and you can insult whoever you like. So I think for a multinational over in the States, that would be something difficult to change. But Twitter campaigns and that kind of thing can have a big effect, and you can cancel your Netflix.
Squid Game is still there.
The other thing you can do is you can start your own campaign with all of the various online boards that you have, Change and what's the other one? There are many that you can use to start your own campaign. It's about spreading the information, spreading the knowledge, making people aware that this happens, and then just re-educating, constantly saying the same message over and over and over and over again. You can't give up on pushing forward. You have to use whatever there is. Cancelling, cancelling your Netflix, that's just you and your mates. That's not going to do anything. However, starting a campaign, there's All Out, that's another one where you can start a campaign there, and you just get the momentum going. What you're saying to Netflix is, there's a voice out there. We don't agree with what you're doing. We don't agree with what you're supporting, what you're standing by. They might not do anything initially, but the next time he opens his mouth and says something dumb, they may say, listen mate, shut up. But you have to have a voice. Create that voice and make it loud so that it's heard. And that's the first thing you do.
Did you want to say something?
No, just nodding in agreement.
Great. Another question?
But I think
Susan, were you waiting for your question?
I think actually what I was going to say was along the lines that Alice was starting, but it was really listening to what Diana was saying about, well, thank you very much for the praise for Gallup, because I was the ex-chair of Gallup, and having the right person who can respond in the right way is really important. But it's also something that we... Oh, sorry if I said something.
That was my phone that went off.
They can be very demanding. So,
I think it was my girlfriend.
they can be very demanding.
I ain't saying anything. I tell you, I'm not saying a word.
But when I was part of Gallup, the chair of Gallup, we set up a project looking at multi-agency response to hate crime, because we've just really focused a lot on the police, although some of the discussion is about the responsibility of other agencies. But we started to look at how people would make contact with those agencies, and then I started to think about the boom in online attacks and abuse, and thinking about what responsibilities of social media, and maybe we've already had some of the conversations about the other broadcasting companies. And I was just thinking about that actually that's one thing that connects with funding, connects actually with sort of making sure you've got the right resources, but the way to get the right resources is to fund them. So it's just, can we kind of develop that, and maybe that's the thing that we need to lobby rather than individual actions. Oh well.
If I could agree with that and say that actually changing the culture, it might take a little bit longer, but changing the corporate culture is really important. But it's like a tanker, and it takes a really long time to steer. But if you can do that, because looking at boards, for instance, if they're not representative of LGBT people or race minorities, then they don't have that understanding of that lived experience. So there are campaigns to raise awareness of that issue, but take it right to the top, to the board. It might take longer, but I think that's a really important way of changing that culture and changing those ideas. And then, and I think in the very first place you should start is looking at early intervention, as mentioned earlier. I think in the very, very long term, I think it's important that young people are, and especially young boys, are not educated as such, but made aware of that they shouldn't have that entitlement. We should all be treated equally, and that should happen from quite an early age. I won't say from a toddler or from somebody who's 5 or 6 years old, but certainly as they start experiencing that power and entitlement, it needs to be impressed upon them that actually, no, this is how we want society to be, and you're a very important part of that. And then 20 years down the line when they're on the board of governors of either a charity or a big corporation, then they'll be able to make those decisions in a good and positive way.
I think the idea of getting a wider representation of boards is good, not just for communities, but good for the board too, and the profits of that company, because it gives them a spread of knowledge and experience to actually guide them in what they're trying to do. But at the moment, we're still struggling to get any kind of near women's representation on these boards, let alone getting anyone else's representation on. So I think that's a battle that needs to be won. But they should be looking at the bottom line, because it's the bottom line. A representation of a wider community gives them wider experience, wider knowledge, and knowledge and experience is what makes money.
There's a company, a charity called Women on Board, and what they do is they try to get more women on corporate boards, and also small charities and trusts and stuff like that. So, and sometimes it is quite interesting when you look at these various job descriptions, you think, I have no idea what this job is about. Honestly, the jargon they use, and they help you break it down, and they look at the skills that you have, and they help match what you've got to what potentially is out there. So if any of you are thinking about doing, they go all across the board and they also look at the LGBTQ community, but it's mainly aimed at women, getting them in on various boards of directors. So they exist. They've been going for, I think, 2 years.
Great. Perfect. Let's have a couple of more questions, and I take it first, and then I go back to you.
Thank you. Yes, I would like to go back to reporting and investigations. So I work on sexual violence in the charity sector, so the issues we are facing are basically the same. There is just under-reporting, and we can't investigate because nothing is reported. But what I increasingly hear from victims survivors is that they can be expected to report because they just went through something that's really traumatic, and it's not their responsibility to now go report, go through the awful process of investigation, and maybe if they are lucky, it will be proven that they were right. So what we were also hearing from victims and survivors was that we should just go and proactively investigate because there are always some rumors, and we always know that something is going wrong. So I was wondering if this is something that was considered when it comes to hate crime, if this is something that is even possible. Because, for example, when it comes to online abuse, this is something you could look for and take some action.
So we have various different departments that look into hate crime. They go through the internet and they do that kind of deep dive in as to really go into the comment section of things. But that's very, very labour intensive, and we need to be aware of if we do not have a victim at the end that is come forward when it goes to a court process, it won't go anywhere. So we need to direct the resources we do have appropriately. That's not to say that we don't need to continue that work, and that's to a degree, yes, people can say, look, this is the information I've had. I'm going to email you this comment section, and they need to know that that is looked at and that that is taken seriously. And it is traumatic for people. I said earlier, I've been the victim of hate crime. It is traumatic, and it does go down to the very root of who you are, and re-traumatising yourself is... However, from a policing point of view, and this is purely from a policing point of view, a lot of our evidence is based upon early parts of the investigation. If we look at sexual violence, we have a sort of 72-hour window maximum, usually 48-hour window for ideal, to get the evidence that we need that really strengthens the case when it goes to court. So we have to try and balance the victim, the evidence, and do the best we can. We can't push someone to a degree that's going to actually cause far more trauma than they've already experienced. But when it then comes to the evidential process, we have to be very much aware that we've potentially lost a section of evidence. There are, in terms of sexual violence, you'll know there's the Haven, which aren't, they're not the police. You can go there and report, and you'll be looked at and and you're not, it's not the police that are there. Because unfortunately the law is very solid in the way that it deals with things. It's very black and white often, and we don't have the luxury of being able to listen to someone and not report that crime. If a crime is reported to me, I have to report it. Whereas these other organisations, they don't have to always do the third-party report. So yeah, I think that there is a need for the information to come in, and people can do that for us. But equally, we have to direct our resources to where we're going to try to solve a crime. If we're not going for an early intervention, if we're not going for a diversion. And if the information is coming in, we can then direct resources, but we may not solve that initial crime, but it could help us to prevent a further crime later on.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah.
Just want to say how interesting I found tonight. You've all been absolutely brilliant. I'm building on Susan's question. If you had superpowers and you could make one change in anything that we discussed tonight to make the biggest impact to reduce hate crime, the problem, what would it be?
That's a lovely question to end with. So if you have superpower, one thing you would change to prevent hate crime? If we just go...
I would start with men. That's what I would do. I would start with men because they are killers. You know, whether we're married to them or they're our fathers, brothers, whatever. That's the issue we're faced with. So I would, if I had a superpower, I would make I have a wand, and I would make them considerate and kind and more thoughtful about women and respectful to women. That's what I would do. I would change their makeup, their outlook, their expectations with one flick of a wand, so that the women around them, they really, truly, deeply valued and respected.
That's a good one.
It's a lot.
A big one.
Yeah, a big one.
Thank you. Thank you.
For me, it would be... I was listening to Scars to You're Beautiful on the way in, actually. I don't know if anyone knows the song. It's a really beautiful song. And she sings about getting the world to change its heart. And so you don't have to change who you are. The world can change who they are. That's what I would change. I would make it so that the world accepts or sees there isn't those barriers. The world can change. You don't have to. You be who you are. And everyone else can... The hearts can be opened up. That would be me.
Nice. That's good. Thank you. Diana?
Take away hate and the propensity for people to hurt each other. Because I'm saying the majority of the violence and the abuse and stuff comes from men. But I worked in refuge, but I also worked in same-sex domestic abuse. And I'm a survivor of domestic abuse from another woman. So I've seen hate from men and hate from women. So if we take away the hate and the propensity for people to hurt other people, I think that would perhaps be a better thing to take away.
Thank you.
I would say after Elaine's gone and sprinkled stardust everywhere, if there was still what I would like to sort of magically make disappear is our consumerist kind of ideals, and it's not capitalism's fault. It's not, but it's in human nature where it's I want, and the internet has sort of made that go even more, and I think and how that's linked into into homophobia, transphobia, misogyny is having people wanting to have things straight away almost brings a sort of like a narcissistic kind of tendency, and that can lead to extreme forms of behaviour. If you look at things like the consumption of, say, like pornography on the internet, that is misogyny, 110%, and yet you've got young teenagers who are having access to this, and they're consuming it, and women are affected by that in a really bad way, and it also changes the values of what society is. So when you liberalise everything so that you can consume everything, the values kind of disappear. So that's what I would say.
Great, thank you. Yeah, I thank you very much. We will be here a little bit, so if you have any other questions, we can ask them afterwards. I just want to say thank you to all of you. It was really interesting, and I think what we can take away is just report for either us or for others if we see that, and make people aware to report. And also, I think I will look up what hate crime is and what actually the prosecution is, and I think not only women should know that, but also men should know that, because if they realize, oh my God, if I do that, I could end up 2 years in jail, then they would probably behave a little bit better. So I think that not only women have to do their homework, also men have to be maybe exposed more to the news of what they're doing. Yeah, so we will be back with another panel discussion. Hopefully very soon. We will tell you all about it. And I just want to say thank you again and give it up to all of our lovely panelists.